Hi. So we learned a little bit about what type of visualizations can be used for time data with D3. So let me show you how to build one of those, like a heat map. So for that, I'm going to use this notebook that I created for analyzing my tweets. So there is an option on Twitter where you can download your Twitter archive. So let's start with this one. I'm going to create a fork of this in the Berkeley team. And then let's change the name before I forget. Let's say this is like D3, like time heat map maybe, starter. So basically what we are going to do in here is that first let's get rid of these visualizations that we have in here that I made on Vega Lite, and let's do now one with D3. So the first step, like if you take a look, like we have 5,000 tweets, as you can see in here. One of those attributes for that, it's going to be the created ad attribute, and then it contains a time-based attribute. So if you see here the way I'm loading the data, this data comes from this Twitter archive, and there is special formatting that you need to do first. In this case, just removing some characters. Then after that is just a JSON object. But then one of the keys in here is that, and actually you can notice that if we get rid of this, if I am, oh yes, like this one, if you get rid of that, then you're going to notice that the date is going to come as a string. So this is a common practice. It's going to happen a lot to you, but since this is kind of like the standard formatting that is used on the web, then you can transform that into a date just by calling something like this. In this case, new date out of that. If you have a format that is a little bit different to that, I recommend you taking a look at the D3 time format that allows you to parse and to transform dates with different formats into actual date objects. Okay. So I'm not going to go into details on that because I don't want to make the video too long. So once you have done that, then this becomes a date, and actually Navier knows it's a date and shows that with purple colors. So let's get started. So for this, like the first things you are going to need, it's like the typical ones that we have been doing. So let me come in here and then say that we are going to use the scatter plot starter, if I can find it quickly. Here it is. So let's start with this one, and then let's put that in here. We are also going to use like this eye width and the eye height because we are going to be using axes. So let's put this in here. I also need an X attribute, and in this case is going to be, let's say, maybe the day of the week, or yeah, let's say this one is the hours, and then the Y attribute can be our day of the week. And then apart from that, like maybe remove this extra space in here. The other things we need is the margins that have to be around here somewhere. And then of course the height, that in this case is going to be like 600 pixels or something like that. So apart from this, let's get rid of this one. As you can see, we are missing our scales. So basically we are going to be doing a heat map on, as I said before, on the attributes by hours and days of the week. So we need two scales for that. So because it's a heat map, and basically, even though those heat maps are for continuous variables, like we are going to look at those as discrete variables. So it's pretty much like a categorical attribute. So for those, instead of using express, we are going to be using separate order and align. What that means is that when you actually create the scale, you should be using scale band instead of using scale linear or something like that. So in this case, for instance, for the X scale, we are going to create a scale that has a range, the typical one from 0 to I width, and then the domain, we say that is going to be the days of the week. So in that sense, we can just get D3 dot, let's do a range that goes from 0 to 7, okay? So this is failing because even though I have D3, when you take a look at this code, since I was doing this on Vega, I wasn't including the full D3 library. So let's use D3 version 6. Now we have this working. We're going from 0 to 7 because when you take the data, I think this is tweets. And if you save this in a date object, and then let's get the created add attribute of that first tweet, then you will see that you have certain functions that you can apply on a date object. One of those is the get day one. And when you run that, you're going to see that it's actually numbers from 0 to 7. 0 being, I think, Sunday, depending on what's your locale. So if you want to know more about that, go and check the MDN date documentation. Excuse me, the Mozilla Developer Network. And you're going to find all of the different options. We are going to be using get hours and get day. So it goes from 0 to 6. That's why we are using the 3 range. So having done that, excuse me again, so let's create the other one. That will be the Y scale. In this case, this is going to go from 0 to 24. And we are going to be going from 0 to height. And in this case, we are not going to flip the scale because it's okay to actually start from 0 on the top. So having done that, then we can start drawing our stuff. So let's create our marks. If I run this, this is our base of it. So now you can see all of the hours and then the days. And as you can see, I messed up the labels in there. This is axis button, X attribute. Yes, so for this one, I want the Y attribute, and this one is going to be the X attribute. And in this case, these are just labels. So since we are going to be doing a heat map, basically what's going to be happening is that we need to be drawing rectangles. So we can take our G drawing and then select all the, let's call them cell or something. And then we can do data binding with whatever tweets we have. Or actually, since we have this navio, and this navio is returning what are the selected elements, then I can, and then if I do this, then I'm going to be only be drawing for those 800 tweets. Then let's use selected in here. Then we do a join with a rectangle, and then very important since we are selecting by class. So let's add the class so it can be finding that afterwards. So after doing that, we can change the attributes. Since these are rectangles, we need to change X and Y. So in this case, we can just say X out of D dot created at dot, and then X is going to be the day. So something like this. So this is going to return a number from 0 to 6. And this one, it's going to be converting that using the scale. So if you do this, and then we do the same for X and Y. So on Y, we want to use the Y scale. And in this case, it won't be get day, but get hours. And finally, you need to define two more. Am I missing? Yes, I am. This one as well. So if for the width, we can use, remember that the scale band has a bandwidth attribute, so we can actually let it know that we going to use that. And then, and actually this doesn't need to be a function because we're not using D at all. So we can have this in here, and then for the height, we can have also the bandwidth. It's not the band height. So we have that. And then finally, we need to use a fill, and then the fill is going to be D of the color of the, in this case, and this starts becoming like one of my problems. So let's say D of, like in this case, 1. So I haven't created color, so we have to fix that. So let me comment this out for a second. And then when you do this, then you're going to start noticing this. Good thing that I had this selected, because when you go and check this, there is a problem, and is that actually I am drawing like 800 of this. And the reason why I have so many rectangles is that I created a rectangle for each element. So since this is a heat map, it's one of the density charts, then I actually need to do some aggregation. So I need to count, and that's why I didn't know what I should be putting on the color variable. So instead of doing that, let's do like grouped data. And then this is going to be a D3, let's say rollups. rollups of, or actually let's start with groups. So remember that group will return a map, and groups is going to return an array of arrays. And then I'm going to use this on the selected data, grouping by, and then here is actually when we are going to be using the created add.getDay. And then here we are going to be using created add.getHours. So basically what we are doing is that we are grouping first by the day of the week, and then by the hour of the day. And then you can see from 0 to 6. And then depending on how many are selected, usually you will find the 24 hours. Like I don't tweet like all the 24 hours. So usually sometimes you won't get them. So this is for the groups, but if you actually want to get the actual number, then that's where you use rollups. So instead of returning the array, you need to provide what is going to be your aggregation function. So in this case, v is like meaning it's a vector, and then we are going to say that it's just the length of the vector, I think. Then by doing that, it says from 0 to 20 elements. That are the 20 hours that are in there. And then at the hour 13, you have 9 tweets. Okay, so now we have something to draw. Now we can use that. Apart from that, I also need a scale for color that I haven't created. So let's say this is going to be my D tree. So this is a color scale, but it's going to be a continuous scale because it's going to have a number of tweets. So remember that for those, you can use scale sequential. So we can actually use one of the nice interpolators that the tree has. Like for instance, let's say that one I used interpolate blues. And then the range is going to control that. And then for the domain, what we can do is that we can say, just use the extent of the grouped data using, and this is going to be my first problem. So I need to find what is the maximum value. So but I don't have it, because when you see like grouped, it's an array of 7 elements, so it's a nested array. So I actually want to transform this. And then when I'm going to be visualizing that, I need to have instead of a nested array, I need to have like just a regular array. I could do a way in which I do select, and then I like for each level of this, I create a grouping, and then I do another select all inside and distribute in there, but that could be more complicated. But instead, so what we could do is that we can take and transform this. So let's say that, so the first one is days. So let's say day, and then day sub 0. So actually, let's do it like this. Let's say that we are going to get the day and then hours. So this, or let's call it B. So we use B in the other one. And then this is going to be an array. Hopefully this will work. It seems that it's not liking that syntax. That seems better. So what that means is that it's going to take the first parameter and it's going to break it into 2 because it's 2 parts in there. And then basically what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take the second element, and then I'm also going to do a map in there. I'm going to use the same trick, and in this case is the hour, comma, and then like the value, okay? So, and then with that, what I'm going to return in there, it's an object that has the day, hour, and value. This came out quite nicely. You can see my happy face about that. So when you do that, then basically what it's going to do is that it's going to replace like the inner level. It's going to replace them with an object that it's actually easier to understand. And then now the only thing I need is to flat this thing. And there is a nice method that you can use for that on arrays in JavaScript that flattens a nested array like that. So now I know what to use in here. So this just should be like d.value. And it's very important that you spell correctly d to extent. If you want to check if your domains are working properly, then remember, if you pass a parameter to the domain, it will set it. If you don't pass any parameters, you will get a getter. So that's exactly what we want from 1 to 20. So that's good. So now we can change this. So since we are using now the grouped version, not the selected tweets directly, then we can just change this here. And then this one won't be get days. We already got that process in d.day. This will be d.hour. And then the bandwidths are okay. And then the color is going to be d.value. Okay. So when you do that, of course, I have an error because Prettier filled that for me. And then now you can see that this is working a little bit better. If you don't want that to be that width or that wide, right now it's like actually trying to keep like all the space that is available. Then what you can do is change the domain. Like for instance, we could say, or the range for the X attribute, like we could say that this can be like, for instance, the bandwidth times 7. So actually we have squares, as you see in there. The other thing is that maybe you don't want to use these lines in there, so we can get rid of those. So this could be a nice time to show how to do that. So here are my axes, and then you can see that I have already used this call nested method that helps me changing parameters of the axis. Let's use it again, and I can get my axis once more. And then I can say that I'm going to select all the paths in there, and I'm going to remove them. And by doing that, at least I got rid of the lines. This is for the x-axis. And then let's say that I'm also going to do that. I think there is another one that is like line. So when you do that, I'm getting rid of all the lines as well. And I can repeat that for the y-axis, and then get rid of those elements. Now, maybe this one will be a good thing to put in a different place now. So I think for the axis bottom, this is moving to the right. Here, so this one should be like my x-axis, like my range in the position 1 maybe. So made a mistake in there. I wonder where it got to. It should be around here. Let's see. Two really quickly, and if not, I'm going to give up on that one. So yes, I'm wondering, is this one day of the week? So it's actually in the coordinate 160. Oh, maybe it got behind there we go. So basically what we could do is put this below, like maybe plus like 25. So it got behind the rectangle, so that's why we couldn't see it. And then let's create a like bigger margin in there, so we can see that at work. There we go. And finally, like one of the things, like maybe you don't want this day of the week as numbers, so we can change that as well. So for that, we can use a trick that I really like that Mike Bostock had, that is to create a date format. And basically what he did is that, so we want to transform the numbers into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's say that we use H for Thursday, then Friday, Saturday, and it's in that order. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take my day as a parameter, that it's a number, and since that is an index, I can just say like D of this, and then that formatting I can pass to my axis. In this case will be, I think, in here, and I think it's called tick format, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, is like this. Yes. Okay, so now I have these elements, I have the other one. Right now it's actually showing the count of the number of tweets. I can show also, like if you're an observable, you're lucky to just be able to do this. I can just say I'm going to create a legend for the color. If not, you have to create it yourself. And then just import legend from D3 color legend, I think is what the notebook it's called. And there you go. So now this is the number of tweets, and it's going from 0 to 20. And if you select less, then it's telling me what are the times I'm tweeting the most. There's a couple things in here. And then the first one is that this is saying that I'm tweeting like on Tuesdays. I have tweeted a lot on 6 a.m. And that actually is not the case. Like I don't get up to tweet that much. So basically one of the problems with that is that all of these dates are in UTC time. And I'm actually in right now here when I'm recording this in Bogota, Colombia. So that is, it's like UTC plus 5 hours. So There's many ways of fixing that. I'm going to take a very lazy approach, and what I'm going to do is that when I'm actually drawing this grouping in here, I'm going to add not to the day, but to the hour. So I'm going to append those 5 hours, and then this is more accurate. So actually I tweet a lot more like around noon. So that's telling me something. Now if I wanna actually see what are my best times of tweeting, like I might want to be able to see that like when I'm getting more retweets. So I can get and say, going to create the mean of B, and where D is D dot retweet count. So that is an attribute that we have in the data. And then basically what I'm doing is that I'm using a different aggregator that is going to compute the mean value. Now this is telling me that this is the one that has the highest mean. And the problem with that is that like when you're doing analysis, like first you shouldn't be considering the ones that have, like I have some really few tweets that have really high values, and then I have a lot of them that have 0 value. So, or 0 retweets. So I can get rid of this. I can hit option, and that gets me minus the filter, and then I get this. And then in there, I can say, you know what, like let's get everything, but this one that has 400, that's too much. So like maybe ones that have like 112 or something like that. And then like maybe a little bit more, less. And then you start noticing certain patterns of certain days that I have more retweets. So the nice thing about having a view with this is that you can actually start filtering and then start doing comparisons. Like for instance, comparing my tweets on English versus my tweets on Spanish. But that's the basic concept. In this case, and we are just using a scale band for using a heat map. One nice thing to have, that it's one that I actually had for the Vega Lite version, is to actually show the actual data. So to draw like a point and then changing like the scale of the hours, and then showing like how many retweets you have, and then also showing the mean. So that's another option. There's many things that you can do with time, but it's just a matter of knowing how to handle the time. And then the other key in here is extracting the parts of the time that you care about. Either aggregating using truncating or extracting using date parts, as I did it here. I hope you like it.